The scorching sun beats down as Karen storms across the pool deck, her face twisted with rage. Without warning, she winds back and slaps an innocent man across the face. But this man is no ordinary bystander. He's an off-duty cop. In a flash, he tackles Karen to the ground, restraining her as she thrashes and screams. The stunned onlookers fall silent, realizing they've witnessed an explosive confrontation that will have serious consequences. The midday heat was suffocating, but it did nothing to cool Karen's temper. She had come to the public pool with her bratty kids, fully expecting a relaxing afternoon. But from the moment they arrived, everything had gone wrong. First, her youngest had thrown a tantrum over not getting an ice cream. Then, the lifeguard had scolded her older son for running near the deep end. Now, as Karen tried to wrangle her unruly family, a man cut in front of her in the crowded locker room line. "Excuse me," she snapped, glaring at his back. "The end of the line is back there." The man turned around, revealing a stern, chiseled face. "I'm in a hurry, lady. You can wait your turn." Karen's nostrils flared. "I've been waiting for 20 minutes with these kids. The least you could do is—" "Listen, I don't have time for your attitude." The man's eyes narrowed. "Why don't you take a chill pill and—" Before he could finish, Karen's hand shot out and she slapped him hard across the face. The resounding crack echoed across the pool area, silencing the splashing and laughter. The man recoiled, his eyes widening in shock. Then his expression darkened with fury. In one fluid motion, he lunged forward and tackled Karen to the ground, pinning her arms behind her back. "Get off me!" Karen shrieked, thrashing wildly. "Let me go, you brute!" "Shut up and stop resisting!" the man yelled, his knee pressing into her back. "You just assaulted a police officer. You're under arrest." The crowd erupted into gasps and murmurs as they realized the man was an off-duty cop. Karen's face drained of color, her struggling growing weaker. No, this can't be happening," she whimpered, her bravado evaporating. I didn't know." "Tell it to the judge," the officer growled, yanking Karen's arms behind her back and cuffing her wrists. "You just made a very big mistake." As the cop hauled Karen to her feet, her kids began to wail, drawing even more attention to the spectacle. Karen felt the eyes of the crowd burning into her, their expressions ranging from shock to grim satisfaction. This was not how her day at the pool was supposed to go. Now she was headed to jail, her reputation in shambles. Karen swallowed hard, realizing the full weight of her actions. She had let her temper get the better of her, and the consequences were going to be severe. The squad car's sirens blared as it sped through the streets, Karen sitting in the back seat with her hands cuffed in front of her. She stared out the window, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. How had a simple trip to the pool turned into such a nightmare? When they arrived at the police station, the officer roughly hauled Karen out of the car and marched her inside. She stumbled to keep up, her legs shaking. This was all moving so fast. She felt disoriented and overwhelmed. In the booking room, the officer pushed Karen down into a chair and barked at her to place her hands on the counter. As he began the process of processing her arrest, Karen's panic started to set in. "Please, you have to understand," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hit you. I had no idea you were a cop." The officer paused, staring at her with cold, unsympathetic eyes. "That's not an excuse, ma'am. Assaulting a police officer is a serious crime, regardless of intent." Karen swallowed hard, her mouth feeling dry. But I've never been in trouble with the law before. Surely there's something we can work out." "I'm afraid not." The officer resumed filling out the paperwork. "You're going to be spending the night in jail. We'll let the judge decide how to handle this in the morning." Karen's heart sank. Jail? She had never even been handcuffed before, let alone thrown in prison. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in, and she felt utterly powerless. "Please, you have to let me go," she begged. "I have a job, a family. I can't go to jail." The officer shook his head. "You should have thought about that before you put your hands on a cop." He finished the paperwork and gestured to another officer. "Take her to holding." As Karen was led away, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a window. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, and her eyes wild with terror. This wasn't how her day was supposed to go. She was supposed to be relaxing at the pool, not facing the terrifying prospect of prison. But there was no escaping the consequences of her actions now. Karen felt her stomach twist with dread, realizing that her world was about to come crashing down. The holding cell was cold, dimly lit, and packed with a motley crew of petty criminals. Karen huddled on the hard bench, her arms wrapped around herself as she tried to make herself as small as possible. Around her, the other inmates jeered and taunted, sensing her fear. She kept her head down, praying that no one would notice her. All she wanted was to disappear. After what felt like an eternity, the cell door clanged open, and a gruff-looking officer stepped inside. "All right, listen up," he barked, his eyes sweeping over the group. "Your bail hearing is in the morning. Try to get some sleep. You're gonna need it." Karen's heart raced. Bail hearing? She had never even been arrested before, let alone had to go through the legal system. The prospect of standing before a judge filled her with dread. As the officer left, the other inmates began to grumble and gripe. Karen tried to make herself as unnoticeable as possible, praying that no one would target her. But her luck was about to run out. A tall, tattooed woman sauntered over and loomed over Karen, her lips twisted in a sneer. "Well, well, what do we have here? A little rich bitch who thinks she's above the law." Karen shrunk back, her pulse pounding. Please, I didn't mean to." "Shut up," the woman snapped, spit flying from her lips. "You think you can just waltz in here and think you're special. That's not how it works, sweetheart." Karen trembled, her mind racing. She had to get out of this situation before it escalated. "I don't want any trouble. I'm sorry. I'll just—" Too late for that. The woman grabbed Karen by the collar of her shirt and yanked her to her feet. "You're in our world now, princess, and in here you play by our rules." Karen let out a terrified whimper as the woman's grip tightened. She was at the mercy of these hardened criminals, and she had never felt so powerless. Just then, the cell door clanged open again, and 2 officers strode inside. "All right, break it up," one of them shouted. "No fighting in the holding cells." The tattooed woman reluctantly released her grip on Karen, who stumbled backwards, gasping for breath. As the officers escorted the other woman away, Karen sank back down onto the bench, her whole body shaking. She had to get out of here. But with her bail hearing looming, the prospect of freedom felt further away than ever. The morning sun had barely peeked over the horizon when Karen was roused from a fitful sleep and ushered into the courtroom. Her eyes were bleary, her hair disheveled, and her heart pounded with anxiety. As she stood before the judge, flanked by 2 uniformed officers, she felt completely out of her element. This was a world she had never imagined herself inhabiting, a place of harsh punishment and unforgiving rules. The judge studied her for a long moment, his brow furrowed. "Karen Wilkins, you stand accused of assaulting a police officer. How do you plead?" Karen's mouth felt dry as sandpaper. I'm innocent, Your Honor. I didn't know he was a cop. It was all just a terrible misunderstanding." The judge raised a skeptical eyebrow. "So you're telling me you assaulted this officer by accident?" "Yes, exactly." Karen clutched the edges of the podium, her knuckles turning white. "I would never intentionally attack a police officer. I'm a law-abiding citizen, I swear." The judge glanced down at the file in front of him. "According to the report, you slapped the officer across the face in a crowded public area. That doesn't sound like an accident to me." Karen's heart sank. The judge clearly didn't believe her. But Your Honor, I. Save it. The judge held up a hand, silencing her. Assaulting a police officer is a serious offense, regardless of intent. I'm going to set your bail at $10,000. Karen's breath caught in her throat. $10,000. I don't have that kind of money. Then I suggest you find a way to come up with it, the judge replied sternly. Otherwise, you'll be spending the next few months in county lockup. Panic rose in Karen's chest. Months in jail? The thought made her feel physically ill. She had to get out of this, had to find a way to fix this terrible situation. Please, Your Honor, she pleaded, her voice trembling. My family needs me. I have a job, responsibilities. I can't go to jail. But the judge was unmoved. That's not my problem, Ms. Wilkins. The law is the law, and you broke it. Bail is set at $10,000. Take her back. As the officers grabbed Karen's arms and led her back to the holding cell, she felt as if her world was crumbling around her. This couldn't be happening. How had a simple trip to the pool turned into a living nightmare? Karen had never felt so powerless, so utterly at the mercy of a system she didn't understand. But as the cell door clanged shut behind her, she knew she had to find a way to fix this, no matter what it took. Karen paced the cramped holding cell, her mind racing. She had to find a way to come up with the bail money, and fast. The thought of spending months in jail was utterly terrifying. As she racked her brain, the cell door clanged open, and a familiar face appeared. Her husband, Richard. Karen rushed over to the bars, grabbing them with trembling hands. Richard. Oh, thank God you're here. You have to help me. Richard's brow was furrowed with worry as he looked at his disheveled wife. Karen, what happened? The kids and I have been out of our minds with worry. Karen's eyes welled with tears. I made a terrible mistake, Richard. I slapped an off-duty cop at the pool, and now I'm facing assault charges. The judge set my bail at $10,000. Richard's eyes widened in shock. What? $10,000? How are we supposed to come up with that kind of money? I don't know. Karen's voice cracked with desperation. But I can't go to jail, Richard. Please, you have to help me. Richard ran a hand through his hair, his face etched with worry. Okay, let me see what I can do. I'll call your parents, see if they can loan us the money. Karen felt a glimmer of hope. Do you think they'll help? Richard hesitated. I'm not sure. You know how they feel about your temper. But I'll do my best to convince them. Karen's heart sank. Her parents were always quick to judge her, and this incident would only confirm their low opinion of her. But she had no choice but to swallow her pride and accept their help. Please, Richard, she pleaded. You have to convince them. I can't go to jail. I just can't. Richard nodded solemnly. I'll do everything I can. Just try to hang in there, all right? I'll be back as soon as I can. As Richard hurried away, Karen sank down onto the hard bench, her head in her hands. The weight of her predicament threatened to crush her. If her parents refused to help, her future would be unimaginably bleak. Karen had to find a way to fix this. She simply couldn't accept the alternative. With renewed determination, she vowed to do whatever it took to get out of this nightmare and reclaim her life. The wait for Richard's return felt endless. Karen paced the holding cell, her nerves fraying with each passing minute. What if her parents refused to help? The thought of spending months in jail filled her with a crushing dread. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the cell door clanged open and Richard appeared, his face etched with concern. Karen, he began, his voice heavy. Karen's heart sank. They said no, didn't they? Richard nodded slowly. I'm so sorry, honey. They just don't think we deserve their help after what happened. Karen felt as if the air had been knocked out of her. No, this can't be happening. She gripped the bars, her knuckles turning white. There has to be something else we can do. Richard reached through the bars, taking her hands in his. I've already tried everything I can think of. No one we know has that kind of money to lend on such short notice. Karen felt panic rising in her chest. Well, then you have to come up with the money somehow. Sell the car, take out a loan. I don't care. Just get me out of here. Richard's eyes were apologetic. I'm so sorry, Karen, but I just don't have the means to come up with $10,000 that quickly. I've already maxed out our credit cards just to make bail. Karen stared at him, her mind racing. You mean, you couldn't even post my bail? Richard shook his head, his expression pained. The judge wouldn't accept anything less than the full amount. I'm afraid you're going to have to stay here until your hearing. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the reality of the situation crashed down on Karen. She was going to jail, really, truly going to jail. The thought was utterly paralyzing. No, this can't be happening, she cried, tears streaming down her face. I can't go to jail, Richard. I have a life, a family. I can't just lose everything. Richard reached for her again, his touch gentle. I know, sweetheart, I know. But you have to try to stay strong. I'm going to do everything in my power to get you out of this. I promise. Karen clung to his hands, her body racked with sobs. Please, Richard, you have to find a way. I can't survive in here. I just can't. As the guards came to usher Richard away, Karen felt a crushing sense of helplessness. She was trapped, at the mercy of a system she couldn't comprehend. The thought of spending who knows how long behind bars was enough to shatter her. Karen had never felt so utterly alone. With Richard gone, and no hope of bail, she had never felt more powerless. The days crawled by in the oppressive confines of the holding cell. Karen's once immaculate appearance had deteriorated, her hair matted and her clothes rumpled. Dark circles had formed under her eyes from the strain of endless sleepless nights. Each minute felt like an eternity as she waited for her day in court. She replayed the incident at the pool over and over in her mind, torturing herself with what-ifs and shoulda-coulda-wouldas. If only she had kept her temper in check, if only she had known the man was a cop. Maybe then she wouldn't be facing the devastating prospect of jail time. But dwelling on the past did nothing to change her bleak reality. Karen's only hope now rested on her lawyer, a gruff public defender who had promised to fight for her case. Still, the odds seemed stacked against her, and her confidence waned with each passing day. As the day of her trial finally arrived, Karen felt a surge of adrenaline. This was her chance to plead her case, to convince the judge that her actions were a regrettable mistake, not a malicious assault. With trembling steps, she followed the guards into the courtroom, her eyes sweeping the room for a familiar face. To her relief, Richard was there, sitting in the front row. Their eyes met, and she saw the pain and worry etched on his features. Karen's heart swelled with gratitude. At least she wasn't facing this ordeal alone. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Karen straightened her spine, determined to project an air of confidence, even as her insides churned with terror. Karen Wilkins, the judge began, his voice stern. You stand accused of assaulting a police officer. How do you plead? Karen's lawyer rose, clearing his throat. Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. This was a simple misunderstanding, not a malicious attack. The judge raised a skeptical eyebrow. Your client struck a police officer across the face in a public setting. That seems quite deliberate to me. With all due respect, Your Honor, the lawyer continued, my client had no idea the individual was a law enforcement officer. She acted in the heat of the moment, but there was no intent to commit a crime. The judge considered this for a moment, his gaze fixed on Karen. Be that as it may, Ms. Wilkins, your actions still have serious consequences. The law is clear on this matter. Karen felt her heart hammering in her chest as the judge paused. This was it, her final chance to convince him of her innocence. Summoning every ounce of courage, she spoke up. Your Honor, I am truly, deeply sorry for what happened. I never meant to harm anyone, and I am not the kind of person who would deliberately attack a police officer. I was simply having a bad day, and I let my temper get the better of me." Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. "Please, I am begging you, don't send me to jail. I have a family who needs me, a life and a career that would be destroyed. I promise it will never happen again." The courtroom fell silent as the judge considered her words. Karen held her breath, praying that her desperate plea had resonated. The judge's gaze bore into Karen, his expression unreadable. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as everyone waited with bated breath for his decision. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. "Ms. Wilkins, I've given your case a great deal of thought. While I understand this was an unfortunate misunderstanding, the fact remains that you assaulted a police officer. That is a serious offense, and one that cannot be taken lightly." Karen felt her heart sink. This was it. Her worst fear was about to be realized. However, the judge continued, "I also recognize that you have no prior criminal history and appear to be a productive member of society. Therefore, I am going to offer you a plea bargain." Karen's eyes widened with hope. "A plea bargain?" The judge nodded. "If you plead guilty to a lesser charge of disorderly conduct, I will suspend your sentence and place you on probation for 1 year. You will also be required to pay a fine and complete an anger management course." Karen could scarcely believe her ears. "So, I won't have to go to jail?" "Correct," the judge replied. "As long as you abide by the terms of your probation, you will avoid any jail time. However, I must warn you, one slip-up, and you'll be back here facing much more severe consequences." Karen felt a wave of relief wash over her. She couldn't believe her luck. She had somehow managed to avoid the nightmare scenario she had been dreading. Turning to her lawyer, she nodded vigorously. "I'll take it. I'll do whatever it takes, Your Honor." The judge regarded her sternly. "See that you do, Ms. Wilkins. This is your one and only chance. Don't squander it." As Karen was led out of the courtroom, she caught Richard's eye. He was beaming, his face split in a wide grin. Karen felt a surge of gratitude and love for her husband, who had never given up on her. Though the ordeal had left her shaken, Karen knew she had learned a valuable lesson. She would never again let her temper get the better of her, not when the stakes were so high. From now on, she would be more mindful, more in control of her emotions. As she walked out of the courthouse, Karen felt a renewed sense of purpose. This experience had been a wake-up call, a chance to reflect on the consequences of her actions. She was determined to become a better version of herself, for her family, and for her own peace of mind. The road ahead might not be easy, but Karen was ready to face it head-on. After all, she had just survived the biggest challenge of her life. Anything else paled in comparison.